English speakers often have trouble using the French subjunctive. My students often ask me to talk about it, so let's do it. Bonjour, I'm Géraldine, your French teacher. Welcome to Comme une Française. Today, like every Tuesday, I'm here to help you get better at speaking and understanding everyday modern French. C'est parti. Le subjonctif, the French subjunctive, is a special form of conjugation for French verbs. English speakers have to face two main problems with the subjunctive. The first one is that the rules for when to use the subjunctive are really complicated. And the second one, it is that they have to learn a brand new conjugation, and it makes the irregular verbs even more irregular. For instance, for the pretty simple irregular verb avoir, in the present tense we have nous avons, and then in the subjunctive it becomes nous ayons. For vouloir, for example, je veux becomes je veuille. That's really weird. But at least for regular verbs, it is quite straightforward. In this lesson, I will cover 3 irregular verbs. Write them down, okay? The first one is être. Yes, it is to be. The one that is in the usual present, je suis, tu es, il ou elle est, nous sommes, etc. Okay? So in the subjunctive, it makes que je sois, que tu sois, qu'il ou elle soit. We don't say the end consonant there. Que nous soyons, que vous soyez, qu'il soit. Great! So when to use the subjunctive? By the way, before we dive into that, you have to know that the subjunctive is scary, but don't worry too much about it. Yes, you have to know it exists, so you're not really worried when it comes up, but honestly, just learn it as you go, because French people don't care if you make mistakes with the subjunctive. They know it's difficult, and it really doesn't matter too much. English speakers can spend a lot of time on le subjunctive, but that's really not the best way to spend your study time. It's much better to practice your oral comprehension, to build your confidence to speak, improve your vocabulary, or even work on other tenses. A few tips and a few conjugations, like the ones we're going to see in today's lessons, can already go a long way. So, when do we use the subjunctive? Let's concentrate on the most common uses. The first one is wanting something. We use vouloir que. Je veux que plus subjonctif. For example, je veux que tu sois meilleur à l'école. I want you to be better at school. Je veux que tu sois meilleur à l'école. Now, as you can see, the subjunctive applies to the second verb. And something very important is that you need 2 subjects for the 2 different verbs. If there is only 1 subject and 2 verbs, it is completely different. Another example. Je veux que ce soit fait rapidement. I want it done quickly. Je veux que ce soit fait rapidement. Il veut que je sois là à 17h. He wants me to be there at 5 p.m. Il veut que je sois là à 17h. The subjunctive always comes after a que or a qui, so we often add them to the conjugation table. The subjunctive also comes up in sentences that start with il faut que, with the impersonal il. Il faut que plus subjonctive. That means it is necessary that. For example, il faut que tu sois là à 18h. Il faut que tu sois là à 18h. Literally, it needs to be that you be there at 6 p.m. So it means you need to be here at 6 p.m. Il faut que tu sois là à 18h. Another example. Il faut que nous soyons plus gentils. We need to be nicer. Il faut que nous soyons plus gentils. Il faut que j'aie de meilleures notes. I need to have better grades. Il faut que j'aie de meilleures notes. And our second irregular verb, it is avoir. avoir, to have. In the present, j'ai, tu as, etc. But in the subjunctive, it is que j'ai, que tu es, qu'il est, que nous ayons, que vous ayez, ou qu'il, elle est. Fantastic! Now, we come into more complicated stuff. Some sentences in French require the subjunctive when they are negative, but they are in the indicative otherwise. For example, with penser, to think. Penser que is to think that. In the affirmative way, we say je pense qu'il est là. Je pense qu'il est là. I think he's here. And here you have a structure, je pense que plus indicative. And if we put this in the negative form, we have je ne pense pas qu'il soit là. Je ne pense pas qu'il soit là. And here you have the structure, je ne pense pas plus subjunctive. Another example is with croire, to believe. Croire. We say croire que. I think that. Je crois que tu as raison. Je crois que tu as raison. I think you're right. If we put this in the negative form, we say je ne crois pas que tu aies raison. Je ne crois pas que tu aies raison. And here, as you can see, it is je ne crois pas plus subjunctive. That's why we often say that the subjunctive is used for doubt or uncertainty. But it is also used in other expressions, such as quoique, it is followed by the subjunctive. It means whatever plus a verb. For example, quoi que ce soit, whatever it is, or jusqu'à ce que, and then we add a subjunctive. Jusqu'à ce que, until, and then you add a verb. For example, je cours avec toi jusqu'à ce que tu arrêtes. I will run with you until you stop. Je cours avec toi jusqu'à ce que tu arrêtes. But here you might say that que tu arrêtes. Okay, it's a subjunctive. But Géraldine, it really looks like a present. Yes, because les verbes du premier groupe, the first group verbs that end in ER, really look in the subjunctive the same way as they are in the present. For example, with arrêter, to stop, arrêter, we say que j'arrête, que tu arrêtes, qu'il ou qu'elle arrête, que nous arrêtions, and here is the difference, que vous arrêtiez, and another difference, and qu'ils arrêtent. As you can see, it's pretty easy because we took the present and we only added an I, un I in French, with nous and vous, and that's it. And this is exactly the same for all the verbs that end in ER, for example, marcher, except for aller, which is irregular. And our third and irregular verb today, a very useful one, aller. Aller, to go. Remember in the present, je vais, tu vas, il ou elle va, etc. In the subjunctive, it makes que j'aille, que tu ailles, qu'il ou elle aille, que nous allions, que vous alliez, qu'ils aillent. Wonderful! Aller is actually more regular in the subjunctive, so this makes it funny. Unfortunately, the other verbs have their own rules, and you can't guess what they're going to be out of the blue. We already covered a few of the most common verbs in this lesson, but I will have to leave it to you to check your conjugation tables for the verbs that you need in everyday life. You can start with savoir, for example. Savoir, to know. It becomes que je sache in the first person and then follows the first group endings. Or vouloir as well, to want something. It's pretty useful as well. It becomes que je veuille in the subjunctive. And you will find more on the blog post that you have the link to below the video. Go there, it's completely free. But let's see first what you got from what we've seen with a quiz. Your turn now. Try to find the subjunctive form for these verbs. The first one is Il faut que j'y plus aller. I have to go. Il faut que j'y plus aller. What's the subjunctive form for aller here? What do you think? Yes, it is il faut que j'y aille. Il faut que j'y aille. It's a very common translation for I have to go. A second one. Elle veut que tu plus the verb changer de chemise. She wants you to change your shirt. Elle veut que tu with the verb changer de chemise. How do you conjugate changer in the subjunctive here? Yes, it is elle veut que tu changes de chemise. Elle veut que tu changes de chemise. Because now you know that first group verbs have the same subjunctive present mostly as the usual present. And that's one more point for you. Now, what would you put here? Je pense que ce être par là. Je pense que ce être par là. I think it's this way. What would you write? Haha. It's je pense que c'est par là. Je pense que c'est par là. And yes, this was a trick question because you did not need the subjunctive here. You only need it in the negative form. So, what would you write in je ne pense pas que ce être par là? Je ne pense pas que ce être par là. So, it is je ne pense pas que ce soit par là. And here is your subjunctive. Félicitations! How many did you get right? Now, you don't need a lot of verbs and conjugations to start speaking in French. So that's why I made a list of the 7 French verbs that you need to know to start speaking in French. But in terms of tenses, l'impératif is pretty useful, l'impératif, and you shouldn't forget about practicing your understanding of oral spoken French, because if you don't, you get stuck in the middle of conversation. So that's why I made a playlist for you with 3 lessons about those topics. Just click here on your screen to learn more about the 7 French verbs that you need to know, l'impératif, and practicing your oral comprehension of French. I will see you in the next video. Just click there. À tout de suite.